Welcome to this visual study. Today, we are going to present a full, impartial summary of an incredibly intricate and honestly mind-bending prophetic timeline proposed by the YouTube channel Repoman64. You know, if you've ever found yourself wondering why someone would dedicate countless hours to tracking down ancient biblical math or trying to unlock these hidden numerical codes buried deep, deep within history, well, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to map out exactly how this creator pieces together historical events, scriptures, and future prophecies using a highly rigid calendar system. Now, if you want to dive even deeper into this creator's work yourself, and I highly recommend you do if you find this interesting, be sure to check out the description right below the video. You'll find a direct link to the original source there. Okay, so grab a notebook because it's time to dive right into this fascinating mathematical architecture. Here's the general blueprint for today's study. We'll be looking at the static calendar, the 5-day pattern, Moses and the tribulation saints, identifying the Antichrist, a real-world cloud refraction, and finally, those all-important prophetic watch dates. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the static calendar theory. To really grasp any of these upcoming prophecies, we first have to talk about the sheer chaos of modern timekeeping. Just think about our current Gregorian calendar for a second. Every 4 years, we just throw in an extra leap day. Holidays constantly shift from a Tuesday to a Wednesday year after year. Imagine trying to solve a millennial-old puzzle, but the edge pieces constantly change shape depending on what year it happens to be. It's impossible, right? That is exactly why the source material fundamentally rejects our shifting modern calendars. Instead, Repoman64 adheres strictly to what's described as a divine standard, a static timeline where a date literally never moves relative to the week. But using this rigid metric, the creator argues we can actually fix major historical discrepancies, specifically accounting for exactly a 75-day offset that exists between conflicting ancient calendars. And when you apply the stack math, it reportedly aligns Jesus' conception perfectly to December 25th, locking it securely into historical place. Now you might be wondering, why base everything on the number 364? Why not just use our standard 365 days? Well, think about the math. A 364-day year is perfectly divisible by 7. That gives you exactly 52 weeks. No awkward remainders, no shifting days of the week year over year. Every date stays exactly where it belongs. Repoman64 notes that historical scholars from antiquity actually utilized similar rigid counts for this very reason. The channel asserts that adhering to this exact, non-fluctuating mathematical framework isn't just a suggestion. It is the absolute only way to reveal these hidden historical and prophetic alignments. Without this locked 364-day baseline acting as an unchanging anchor, the creator argues the entire prophetic timeline just completely falls apart, completely wiped out and lost in the noisy chaos of modern leap years. Moving right along to Section 2, the 5-day pattern. Okay, so with our static calendar locked in place, the channel identifies a recurring mathematical anomaly, one that echoes all the way across different millennia. Look at history. The Israelites supposedly entered the Promised Land exactly 5 days before the calendar date they originally left Egypt. It's a remarkably precise mathematical echo. Then, fast forward centuries later, and the timeline calculates that Jesus began his earthly ministry exactly 5 days before his 30th birthday on the Day of Atonement. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, in biblical study, a pattern like this strongly suggests that history isn't just a random, chaotic series of events. It rhymes. The creator heavily emphasizes that these 5-day gaps are absolutely intentional. They act as divine breadcrumbs, specifically designed to point us directly toward larger prophetic truths. And it gets wilder, because this 5-day mathematical window actually bleeds into the ancient timeline of Enoch, too. The timeline places Enoch's birth on Sivan 6. For a quick context translation, Sivan is the 3rd month in the Hebrew calendar, and the 6th day is historically tied to the biblical holiday of Pentecost, which celebrates the giving of the Torah. Now, here is where the math gets genuinely surprising. The source calculates that Enoch ascended to heaven at exactly 365.25 years of age. Think about that. A human lifespan matching the exact length of a modern solar year, down to the literal quarter day. When you plug that into the static calendar, Enoch's ascension mirrors that exact same 5-day chronological shift we just saw in the events of the Exodus and Jesus' ministry. It's a single solar calculation tying thousands of years of history together. This brings us to Section 3, Moses and Tribulation Saints. We're going to shift gears slightly here, moving from hard calendar math to a really unique theological reinterpretation. It's about what the channel defines as a tribulation saint. The video takes the famous biblical account of Moses striking the rock twice in anger to bring forth water, a historical crime that famously barred him from entering the Promised Land. But the channel uses this as a deep psychological metaphor. Striking the rock twice, that symbolizes those who try to earn their salvation through strict personal works and rigid rules, rather than resting entirely in grace. Grace, the source says, only requires striking the rock once. I mean, think about it. How often do people, even today, try to frantically earn their way into heaven by checking off good deed boxes rather than just trusting the process? That exact mindset, according to the source, is the defining trait of a tribulation saint. Because Moses struck that rock twice, the source posits he actually became the ultimate historical prototype of this works-based believer. And the proposed prophetic trajectory here, it sounds almost like a sci-fi epic. So Moses is barred from crossing over into the Promised Land, and his bones are mysteriously hidden away by God. But why? Well, according to the timeline, it's so that he can return to Earth bodily in the future as one of the 2 prophetic witnesses. For 3.5 years, he will literally walk the earth performing miracles, eventually suffer a highly public death in the streets, and then ultimately ascend to heaven. It is a wildly dramatic narrative, for sure. It stretches a single ancient mistake all the way into a futuristic end-of-days redemption arc. Now, applying Moses' specific template to future events, the channel suggests that these works-based tribulation saints will actually not endure the full, agonizing 7-year tribulation that you so often hear about in mainstream theology. Instead, they're only going to be present on earth during the opening of the prophetic seals. To break that down simply for you, the seals represent a time when God basically takes his hands off the steering wheel. It's a removal of earthly restraint, allowing human chaos to just completely reign supreme. It's a terrible time, sure, but it is not divine punishment. However, right before the actual active wrath of God begins, an era triggered by the blowing of the prophetic trumpets, the channel believes these tribulation saints will be removed from the earth completely. Let's move on to Section 4, Identifying the Antichrist. Having mapped out the saints, the source next tackles the total opposite side of the prophetic coin. Every single day, people look at the news, pointing fingers at modern politicians, billionaire global leaders, or present-day princes in this frantic attempt to identify the Antichrist. But the creator of this timeline, he asks us to stop looking around at modern society. Instead, we need to look backward, way backward. To identify the true son of perdition, the static timeline mathematically forces us to return to a very specific, dimly lit room from thousands of years ago, the historical events of the Last Supper. The channel firmly, absolutely asserts that Judas Iscariot is the Antichrist. The theory presented here is one of incredibly dark, almost poetic symmetry. Think about it. Just as God gave his son to the world for roughly 2 millennia, Satan will finally get to bring his son back to rise for his own 3.5 years. The source links this deeply to the biblical prophecy of a global leader surviving a fatal head wound. The timeline explicitly notes that at the Last Supper, Jesus essentially gave permission for Satan to enter Judas, which set this ancient, yet highly futuristic timeline completely into motion. It is a massive theological twist. It completely recontextualizes the betrayer's ultimate role in human history. All right, Section 5, Cloud Refractions. Now, transitioning abruptly away from all that heavy theological history, we get a really fascinating momentary break from the math to look at a bizarre real-world anomaly. You are deep into complex biblical prophecy, and suddenly the host takes us to a Waffle House in Florida. I know, it is a delightfully unexpected juxtaposition. While eating at the restaurant, the creator witnessed a very strange visual anomaly. Because of the exact way 2 right-angled windows met, combined with a specific time of day, a highly unique atmospheric refraction occurred. Protected Florida pine trees from outside were visually projected directly up into the clouds above the building. The creator shares this as this awe-inspiring moment, a way to bridge the gap between deep, unseen spiritual mathematics and a tangible, real-world reflection. It's like a real-life glitch in the matrix, confirming the math. Finally, we reach Section 6, Upcoming Prophetic Dates. We have officially arrived at the ultimate culmination of the source's complex blueprint. This is the exact spot where the Satic calendar, those 5-day mathematical patterns, and biblical history all intersect to generate highly specific watch dates. The video outlines a very concentrated cluster of dates, specifically targeting July 24th, which is calculated mathematically as the true 9th of Av. According to the blueprint, this leads directly into the 10 days of awe. If you're not familiar, simply put, in Jewish tradition, these are the days of intense spiritual reflection and repentance that happen right between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The timeline views this exact window as a prophetic quiet period, basically a tense, spiritual deep breath before pointing directly to another massive event date on August 15th. But we have to ask, why does the 9th of Av carry such massive, devastating weight in this theory? Well, historically speaking, it's an anchor point of profound tragedy. The static timeline mathematically maps out that exactly 2 years and 115 days after leaving Egypt, the 12 spies sent to scope out the Promised Land finally returned. 10 of them were terrified of the giants they saw, and they delivered a faithless bad report. On the 9th of Av, that bad report was officially formalized by the people. The consequence of that lack of faith? God sentenced that entire generation to wander and eventually die in the punishing desert for 40 years. For the channel, this isn't just trivia. It is a mathematically precise anchor point representing divine judgment and historical repetition. To further validate these specific high watch dates, the source strictly aligns the events of Jesus' life to the exact same static math. The channel confidently locks in December 25th as his conception. And if you follow standard human gestation of roughly 280 days, that places his birth perfectly on the Feast of Tabernacles, a fall harvest festival beautifully symbolizing God actually coming down to dwell among men. Then, as Jewish law dictates, a child is circumcised and named exactly 8 days later, which mathematically lands perfectly on October 7th. According to the video's creator, only these specific interlocking dates perfectly fit the rigid numerical clockwork required by the calendar. It's like a giant divine puzzle locking into place. Now think about the sheer psychological and historical weight of a 2 millennia anniversary. Massive, and I mean massive, prophetic emphasis is placed on the number 2000. The source calculates that August 15th, 2026 marks exactly 2,000 years to the very day since Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River in the year 26 AD. The channel views this 2,000-year mark not just as some neat historical milestone to celebrate, but as a massive, world-altering trigger point for prophetic fulfillment. In this framework, it's literally a mathematical timer, and it's winding down to absolute zero. So what does this actually mean for us as these dates rapidly approach? Well, the channel is watching the calendar incredibly closely, specifically targeting the exact time frame spanning from the 9th of Av straight through the 10 days of Awe. The creator firmly views this window as the beginning of the prophesied earthly temple removal. Currently, believers themselves are considered to be the spiritual temple, but the source notes that this spiritual presence will be completely removed from the earth. This removal leaves a massive void, which then paves the way for a literal physical temple to be constructed, a physical throne that the Antichrist will eventually demand to sit in during his 3.5-year reign of terror. So, as we conclude this impartial study of Repoman64's incredibly vast static timeline, we are left staring at a truly expansive, intricate web of historical numerical patterns. And honestly, it forces us to ask a pretty profound question. If human history really is locked into a rigid, unchanging mathematical grid dictated from above, what does that actually mean for our own free will? And perhaps even more importantly, regardless of what you personally believe, are you ready for the dates that are rapidly approaching on the calendar? Keep studying the math, keep asking questions, and I will see you in the next one.